This week we are starting with the contents of Sword Art Online Volume 11, Alicization Turning, the aptly named turning point of the entire story, as Eugeo needs to step up against the resident dicks Humbert and Raios, as Ronye and Tiese plead help from him and Kirito for Frenica, a friend of theirs from the dorm acting as the trainee page to Humbert Zizek. But can Eugeo even do anything if the dicks are not breaking the taboo index? Can he do anything against the obvious injustice by breaking the taboo index itself? Welcome everyone, and this is Sword Art Online Alicization Explained, featuring episode 9, Nobleman's Responsibilities. As always, timestamps to individual plot points are in the description as well as the pinned comment for easy navigation. As mentioned in the previous week, you can blame the still images on Kadokawa and Sony Music Entertainment for not caring about proper copyright laws, and hashtag Save Your Internet will be on the top right corner to raise awareness against EU's recent copyright shenanigans. Tweet that and make a difference, I guess. But if you are new here to my Alicization Explained series, what I do here is compare the anime to the source material, the light novels, fill in the blanks that the anime didn't cover, and provide in-depth explanations where it didn't provide proper context. As mentioned with episode 9, we started with the contents of V11, Alicization Turning, and the anime covered from the beginning of the novel, chapter 5 part 1, all the way to the end of part 3, and did so quite faithfully. There were a couple of dropped scenes here and there, but they did not affect the narrative all that much, other than the anime making Humbert and Raios look even more of cliché villains than they already are. They were actually a lot more nuanced and sinister in the novels, justifying their actions by providing comparisons between Eugeo's actions and theirs, which will surely cause certain people to just hate on the anime as usual, nothing new. And before we begin, keep in mind that you only have 8 more days left to sign up for my Sword Art Online Volume 12 Alicization Rising giveaway. Link for the giveaway is in the description, and Amazon affiliate links to all available Alicization books are in the description as well if you want to read them yourself and be blessed by the goddess of creation, Stacia. But without further ado, the episode starts very similarly to the novels with a short recap exposition of the past, albeit a slightly different one covering the past adventures, but obviously in an episodic anime, a short recap wouldn't make much sense, so it was neat that it was dropped. However, with that, the information about Academy, the ranks, and character information were also dropped, so one by one, let me provide some boring exposition to you. Those who rank in the top 12 at the end of their first year at the Academy get to become elite disciples and prepare for the Imperial Battle Tournament of North Centauria, the winner of which gets to participate in the Four Empire Unification Tournament, the winner of which was welcomed to the Axiom Church Tower and hopefully become Integrity Knights or at least a higher rank in life. The elite disciples were given rooms based on their ranks in stacks of 2, so the first 2 ranks, which were the resident dicks, Raios and Humbert, received room 301, rank 3 and 4 received room 302, and so on, until rank 11 and 12 received room 206, one floor below. Kirito and Eugeo did want to stay in the same room, but they also had some luck in achieving that. Kirito ranked number 4 in a practical test against instructors, and Eugeo scored 5th, which would result in them having different rooms. However, in form demonstration and sacred arts tests, Kirito was, well, bumped down to 6th place and got room 303 with Eugeo. But elite disciple dorm rooms were not the only advantages of being among the top ranks. You were assigned a trainee page whom you'd mentor, and in return they would help you with your chores. Kirito and Eugeo chose Ronye and Tiese respectively, not due to a specific preference, but rather waited until everyone else chose their pages and then took Tiese and Ronye under their wings respectively. And of course, to answer a question I received from one of my viewers, no, the individual uniform colors themselves do not signify a specific rank. However, the elite disciples do get the freedom to choose the color of their uniform, so Eugeo having a blue uniform has nothing to do with the fact that he is the 5th ranking elite disciple, but rather that he was among the top 12. But going back to the anime again, one relatively major cut had happened when Eugeo remembered why he was at the Academy right before the opening sequence. He remembered Alice, but on top of what was shown in the anime, Alice was not the only thing he remembered from 8 years ago. When Düsselbert Synthesis 7 took Alice, Eugeo was holding the Dragonbone Axe, a weapon that could cut through the Giga Cedar. Not very powerful, but a weapon nonetheless. but he was frozen in place despite a boy around his age screaming, begging and pleading for him to act. Eugeo wasn't sure who that person was. His only childhood friend was Alice, but the sound of the boy was so alive in his head that it couldn't have been his imagination. But all that thought process was cut by the resident dicks of the academy, Raios and Humbert, before Eugeo's right eye started to ache again for thinking too much about that day and those emotions. Obligatory mention that the title card did not change yet again, and that brings my hopes to an end. Unless the OP song/sequence changes entirely, I do not see the beginning text changing into anything else, and damn you A1, if you change the text after I went on record saying this, I'll figure something out if that happens. But back to the training hall, Eugeo was curious about this quote-unquote power nobles like Raios and Humbert possessed, so he graciously accepted the generous offer of Humbert Zizek for a sword lesson by him. In fact, in the novels, Eugeo used much more triggering words towards Humbert, who was surprised by Eugeo's acceptance and tried to downplay him via various remarks until Eugeo cut him off, saying that he did not want to waste their valuable time and suggested that Humbert simply showcase this skill on him directly, building up the tense situation with much more impact. Before starting, Humbert promised to show Eugeo the wrath of the high Norkian style, but Eugeo recognized the skill he was going for. Not from the high Norkian style, mind you, but rather from the regular Norkian style, lightning slash, or rather the sword skill he knew from Kirito's Aincrad style, vertical. He returned the favor by initiating the Aincrad sword skill Slant, a one-hit skill with high versatility that once again he learned from Kirito. At this moment, Eugeo felt really lucky that this lost child of Vecta he met over 2 years ago had not forgotten these styles like the rest of his memory. Their skills clashed, and Eugeo realized he wouldn't be coming out on top based on sheer presence. Ashamed by himself, being scared of actually losing the clash, and more than that, being ashamed that he was fearing the possibility of getting injured despite training to become a swordsman, Eugeo let go of that entire thought process, pulled back and welcomed the injury coming his way to retaliate with the Aincrad style's biggest advantage. Something you may know as the skill connect, being able to change skills one after the other, which wouldn't give Humbert a chance to gain his footing back and eventually coming out on top. But Raios saw this happening, and before it could go any further, he stopped Humbert then and there. He had other plans. He tried to downplay Eugeo this time around with mere words, but Eugeo was having none of that, only making him more angry. But soon, he would get the chance to cross swords with Eugeo like he promised. It's actually really neat to see they are adapting what is about 60 pages of content so faithfully and properly as we go back to Kirito and Eugeo's room. Kirito of course mentions here that you can pretty much do anything unless you are directly breaching the taboo index or other rules, which was something he learned all the way back in Zakaria and encountered time and time again in this world. But hearing Kirito explain the random English expression to the clueless Eugeo is always great. Stay cool. It's something like a mantra for the Aincrad style, according to Kirito at least, meaning keep your calm, but you can use it like a farewell too. Yeah, a farewell too indeed. But as Kirito says, don't use it every time when you're going to bed, Eugeo. But that night, Kirito's remarks about Raios and Humbert's approach to the taboo index was keeping Eugeo's mind way too busy. Even having doubts in the idea of defying the index caused his right eye to twitch with pain. But the next scene here, the picnic scene, actually introduces us to another set of power authority in Underworld hierarchy, the judicial authority given to 4th rank and above nobles in this world, and allows for much higher stakes of punishment to said nobles of lower ranks. Being low-rank nobles, Tiese and Ronye cannot take advantage of this power. These new set of rules will be important, that's why I'm highlighting them a little further than what the anime did so far, and while Eugeo and Tiese were having a more life-oriented discussion here, Kirito, being the weep he is in a passionate speech about sword techniques, typical Kibo. A little bit of fluff was skipped in this scene, but the main content was covered quite perfectly, as Tiese talks about Frenica and what her elite disciple Humbert Zizek is doing. Eugeo instantly blames himself here. Tiese talks about her father's words about how the nobles are more privileged and thus should return this favor by contributing to the society, and how high nobles like Raios and Humbert are doing the exact opposite, and from Kirito's knowledge so was Egom Zakarite back in Zakaria. So the question was asked once again, are the rules that exist in the human empire really truly just? And Kirito shared a bit of his knowledge to everyone. A long time ago, there was a great man named Saint Augustine. He said that an unjust law is no law at all. Humbert may not be breaking the rules of the taboo index and the academy, but his actions are simply wrong. He must not be allowed to bring an innocent girl to tears, he said. Eugeo assumed that this Saint Augustine person was maybe an integrity knight, but Kirito corrected him that he was more of a priest and was probably already dead by this point. But the point was that there always was a higher level of justice in the end, one that is not written in stone. As Ronye puts it, it's a personal justice. Laws are not to be blindly obeyed, but rather the morality behind them should be understood. And that is the reason why Kikoka Seijiro needed Kirito to exist in this world, to inject the world with that specific idea. But after the picnic, Kirito had a chat with Eugeo, which was omitted from the anime, gauging their options. Surely, commanding Humbert to stop would be a futile action, but Kirito knew, while Humbert was not thinking the long term, Raios was more clever than him. Despite being a resident dick of the academy, such allegations towards Humbert would stain his image and honor. But at that point, both realized the implication. Humbert was not being a dick to Frenica just because he was frustrated. He was doing it to push Eugeo to cross the line, to have a reason to accuse Eugeo of an actual rule breach to use his punishment on her. But Eugeo was keen on making up for his actions. He remembered his first year as the trainee page of Golgoroso Balto. During his evaluations of Eugeo, Golgoroso always made Eugeo to strip to check his muscles. He always mentioned that he chose Eugeo as a page not because of his strength but due to his background. He too had grown as a nobody but made it through to the academy through determination and training. But Golgoroso answered Eugeo when he had the courage to ask on their final day, why had Golgoroso chosen him over Kirito? Well, his answer was simple. Kirito was better, yes, but Eugeo showed much higher potential. He also burst into laughter after mentioning that Liana was second seed and that she picked Kirito before he had a chance, but before he left he said one last thing to Eugeo. Earn your way to being a disciple and treat your page well. Eugeo told Kirito that he'd be the one speaking and knocked on Raios and Humbert's door. A minor detail that was omitted in the anime was that Humbert was quite angry that they visited without an appointment, but Raios sinisterly stopped him and said he wanted to hear what they had to say and apologized that he wouldn't be able to prepare tea on such short notice. Once again, the actions of the duo proves Kirito's evaluation of them in this case. And then, Raios asked the key question. Did Humbert violate any rules? Eugeo knew the answer of course, but tried to reason with the high nobles to no avail. Humbert explained that he merely requested a massage at bath time from Frenica due to excessive training, and followed by demanding her to take out her uniform because it was spoiled, saying it was for her quote-unquote health. But the anime skipped a key detail here. Eugeo exclaimed that making a page take out their uniform was a shameless behavior, which caused Raios and Humbert to burst into laughter. They responded that was quite the bold claim coming from Eugeo, who was ordered to take out his uniform all the time by Golgoroso Balto. It was indeed highly hypocritical, at least from an Underworldian perspective. After all, with the culture in place in Underworld, there was no difference between what Golgoroso asked of Eugeo and what Humbert asked of Frenica. In fact, Humbert already had the higher ground here with the excuse of her health. Eugeo was feeling with the urge to strike back, both physically and verbally, but Kirito made a sound, clinging his heels together, bringing Eugeo back to his senses before he did something stupid. Eugeo threatened to call for an investigation and left the room, and I'm pretty sure some of you are already asking why he didn't go to Miss Azurika in the first place. Well, the answer is very clear, isn't it? Eugeo knows it would be futile. In Underworld, there are no real morals. There are rules that must be obeyed. And if you're not breaking any rules in this specific world, it means you are not doing anything wrong in the first place, hence why an investigation would yield no results. And well, Kirito's mention of a trap was included shortly here, but it was glossed over lightly in comparison, since it was a valuable warning to Eugeo to be careful before they actually entered the room. But this scene was also one of those instances that Eugeo had to question the words of the Axiom Church again and again. According to the church, human empire was the domain of Stacia, the goddess of creation, and the inhabitants of the human empire were the embodiment of good, while dark territory was the domain of the dark god Vecta and was filled with the embodiments of evil. So even Raios and Humbert had to be good after all, but Eugeo's doubts regarding the Axiom Church were growing day after day for years now. Later that day, when Tiese arrived at Eugeo's room to report, Eugeo told her to sit down and explain all the string of events, and the rest I got nothing to add. It's one of those great scenes where emotions just take over, and I'm a huge fan of final scenes using the ending theme over the animation, so it's a complete 10 out of 10 for me. That scene could not have been adapted any better. Overall though, I really love this episode. Yeah, there were cuts, but as I said, nothing that really affects the character development or the narrative of the story, which leads to a pretty solid episode in my opinion, but this episode was the calm before the storm. Next episode is titled The Taboo Index, and we are getting to the controversial bit of Sword Art Online Volume 11, Alicization Turning. We will get to see the extent of the Taboo Index and the extent of the obedience of the residents, and the entire story of Alicization will be turned on its head. But no matter what happens, Kirito and Eugeo will be sticking by each other and try to keep walking towards their goal, no matter how impossible it may seem. But if you made it this far into the video and if you have no questions, please do comment "stay cool" to show that you made it this far. If you have questions, ask them instead though, like, don't let me prevent you from asking questions, I'll answer, no worries, I'll answer them. Again, the giveaway link for Volume 12 Alicization Rising is in the description, and you have 8 days to actually participate, along with Amazon affiliate links to all the books that would also support my channel without an additional cost on you. Subscribe and ring the bell icon for more Sword Art Online Explained. Liking the video helps, but a special thanks to my patrons is warranted as usual. Thank you very much for your support. I'll see you next week, stay cool.